which superhero story to you most powerfully illustrates the gospel message?
Well,
This episode is brought to you by our Revo Report Patreon. Join our community to get first access to interviews, Bible study guides, devotionals, and prayer books for adults, youth, families, and marriages. Plus, resources on Christian living, leadership, sermon prep, exclusive Q&As, online Bible studies, and even one-on-one coaching or counseling. Visit patreon.com/Vince Revo and grow in faith and truth with us.
clearly the Superman story has the most immediate way of drawing that analogy, and the two guys, Siegel and Shuster, who came up with it, were both Jewish. So they obviously had a deep Judeo influence in it. They crafted it as a Moses story. Moses in the Ark and the bulrushes is the same as the rocket being shot from Krypton to Kansas. So it's very much a Moses tale, but they also recognize that because they grew up in the 20th century United States, that in Christianity was so dominant that, and to be fair, Moses is a foreshadowing of Jesus in this life as well. So I would say Superman's the easiest to do, and Man of Steel makes that point over and over again. In some of the camera shots and things like that, they show how he again humbles himself and becomes as a man and lives his life to get sand kicked in his face and to be abused by his co-workers and dismissed and these kinds of things. So that's the easiest way. At least in the film and in some of the comic versions. Now things are starting to change. I grew up with what they called the Silver Age, I guess, of heroes in the 70s and in the comic books and things like that, where there was still, Batman had certain parameters put upon him, like he would never use a gun because his parents were shot in. And through the 90s and 2000s, and when they started to make things grittier, although I love The Dark Knight, I love those films, and that question shows up even there. Should one man become a villain to save the rest of society? Right, that's the big question in The Dark Knight, which is exactly what the Jews did with Jesus. It is. What does the high priest say? It is good that one man should die so that the rest should be. The rest should be saved. Right? So same concept. But Superman, I think, would be the easiest parallel. And then, but all of them have certain aspects that from which you can draw some of these different issues.
Wow, that's cool. When is that book going to be coming out? How far along are you?
I actually had to put it aside because I'm working on another project on Islam right now, which I'm hoping to finish this year. And then but I do have some talks that I've done on my YouTube channel about Christianity and superhero movies. Here's a good example. Remember Tobey Maguire Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Remember that the Spider-Man 3, the emo Spider-Man. Now it got chided quite a bit.
Yeah. That's the one with the Venom, right? And he gets
that's the one where Venom's introduced. Well, fascinating study. Here's a great picture of sin. Initially, Peter gets this stuff on him, and he kind of likes it. It enhances his powers, right? He's in control of it, but it makes him feel better. Going back to feelings again, makes him do things kind of a little bit more sharply.
Yeah.
But eventually what happens is the symbiote then starts to overtake Peter. It starts to control him. It starts to change his mood, change his emotions, right? And this is exactly what sin does. When we start getting into sin, we think we can control it. We think we have it under our leash. And then it starts to manipulate, where we start to get more and more driven by it, and it becomes the thing that starts to forge us. Now, what is the way that sin, that Venom, is vanquished in the movie? Do you remember what was the thing that caused him to separate from Peter?
It was the sound, right? It was
noise, but what was the actual noise? And it's true both in the comics and in the film. It was church bells. It was church bells. He was in the steeple in church bells, and that was the thing that actually broke. Isn't that a fascinating fascinating parallel. And
never
then, of
saw
course, in
that,
that
man.
same film, you have Sandman and the whole idea of forgiveness.
Right.
How can we forgive even when we've done bad things, even when others have done bad things to us? That's the theme. So again,
Whoa.
you can, when you start say, how do I explain sin? Here's a good picture, and okay, I get that.
Wow. I didn't have this in my original question, but I do want to get your thoughts on, since we're talking about stories and writers, I want to get your thoughts on Snow White. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know in the history of Snow White, I think also the authors as well were Christians. They were devout Christians, in fact. And the story of Snow White, you see it resonating with um, a gospel message as well. The story of resurrection, of selflessness, of how love saves, of these disciples, so to speak. Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that. I know this wasn't in my original questions, but
Well,
do you have any thoughts
and
on that?
I've not seen the new movie. I just
Okay.
for some reason I just didn't not have the drive to see. I've obviously seen the Disney film, the
Yeah,
1939
the original. Yeah,
animated, yeah, which is far different in some
hmm,
respects.
yeah, way different.
The motivation's different. I think
Yeah.
in our modern culture, again, we're so driven to be edgy that we miss the forest for the trees. We miss those central points, that there's a redemption that can be had, that the hunter um, actually withdraws his hand, and really that's God's providence working through individuals. It's not, doesn't have to be highly mystical for God to save us. It can be just working on the heart of those who want to do the right thing. The problem again with Snow White in the modern context is it became trying to please too many people in too many ways with the modern culture. And Alistair McIntyre, who's a sociologist, talked about things that he calls death works. Death works is an approach of taking something that's established in the arts
Mm.
and changing it in such a way that it loses its hallowedness, it loses its sacredness, it's deforming that which we all understood. So Snow White is a good example of, as you say, this high value of evil is evil and good is good, and evil needs to be vanquished. This is a central understanding of human nature that we have in us. God placed in our consciences this idea that evil needs to be vanquished, which is another
Mhm.
reason why I think superhero movies are always so engaging or attractive, because we all know
Yeah.
that this universe is not the way it's supposed to be. Right? This universe is messed up. We see the murder and the pain, and we have a longing for someone to come in and put it back in right order. And so the superhero movie kind of speaks to that. And with this new Snow White, it gets a little mushy and doesn't seem to make that clarity. So
Mm.
Alistair McIntyre says these death works are kind of doing that, trying to rewrite these understandings that our society held dear and change them to make them not as clear, not as so. Even when we're talking about, and you'll hear this referenced quite a bit in the new Lord of the Rings, I mean, not in Lord of the Rings, in the new Chronicles of Narnia series that they're in talks with right now, where they're talking about having Aslan
Oh,
being voiced by Glenn Close, and it's like, what? You want Aslan voiced by a woman? Wait a minute.
really?
That's not even what C.S. Lewis. No, it wasn't Glenn Close. It was. Oh, I can see her face now, and I'm blanking on the name. But yeah, they want Aslan voiced by a woman, and it's like
Mm.
you got to be kidding me. Why? And that's not just diversity for diversity's sake.
Yeah.
That changes the entire analog. That changes the entire parallel.
Yeah.
And it becomes dangerous in that regard to start doing those
Huh.
kinds of things, because now you're moving out of society and into something that's going to be corruptible. It's a big problem, I think, that we're seeing in modern art now. That you have these pulls, and it's why a lot of these films, fail, because
They're tanking.
they
Yeah.
want to, yeah, they forget that people have this inherent drive to see, goodness vindicated.